Talk Radio. Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In Talk Radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Today, we are very pleased to have a returning guest, economist Andy Sutton. Andy was formerly of the financial community, but today he's involved in the sole purpose of blowing the whistle on this corrupt system that we have. That is, and he also helps people around the globe become their own advocates. Andy, are you there?
I am.
Okay.
How are you?
Fine, thank you. Andy, thank you so much for returning to Liberty Talk Radio. You know, recently there's been a lot of press revolving around the situation with Russia. You know, Russia is such a horrible place. And I have to agree. Let me tell you, because, you know, every time I go now to Walmart, I can't find a parking space. It's just filled with Russian tanks with 50 millimeter guns. You know, I can't even get in the place. You know, am I losing my mind or what? I mean, why do we trump up all this garbage, you know, put missiles on their doorsteps, aimed right through the Kremlin's window, you know, and then we say Russia is the aggressor, we have to do something about it?
Well, see, we were talking about this in the pre-show, and you mentioned the warfare state. And if you remember back to, it was the night of 9/11. I remember very distinctly. I believe it was Donald Rumsfeld. It was on the news being interviewed, and he said this is going to be a war that's going to last 100 years. If it was somebody other than him, somebody can call it and correct me, and you know, but somebody said that. I'm pretty sure it was Rumsfeld. So this is what happens when there's a lot of money in this. You know, Eisenhower warned us against, you know, the military-industrial complex accumulating too much power. JFK talked about it. Reagan talked about it, and then you didn't hear much more about it after that. War is big money, and war is kind of like healthcare now, and this is why the government wants a piece of healthcare. I mean, obviously there's other reasons too, but you know, when you're talking about something that's roughly a seventh of GDP, you know, this is something that people want to get their hands on. Everybody wants to get their finger in that pie, and warfare is no different. There's how many hundreds of thousands of contractors in this country that are making bombs, planes, you know, just logistical stuff, even meals, air conditioners, office supplies, you know, all this. I mean, it just spreads out across the entire economy. And we were talking pre-show, you know, about it would be nice to see how much this is actually costing and how much of the economy is actually going towards warfare. It would be very hard to even figure out, just because that, you know, the military uses so much stuff. I mean, they use toilet paper, you know,
Right.
Everything. You know, you're talking about a huge number of people, so they're going to use everything that people use, and then you have all the specialized equipment and weaponry and, you know, and so forth that's being used. So this is big bucks, and there's a lot of money in this. And if you're going to do the warfare state, you have to have enemies, right? You can't just go around, you know, we're going to beat up on France today. What do you mean France? France is our friend. No, we have to have an enemy.
That's right.
And that was what, you know, this 100-year war nonsense, you know, with ISIS. Well, wait, I'm sorry. They called them Al-Qaeda then. Same group. You know, we need a boogeyman. We need an enemy. You know, so we have Iran. You know, Bush called them the axis of evil. You know, and it was all the countries basically that weren't part of the IMF and World Bank cabal. They wanted to do their own thing. And you know what? They had some, you know, I have no doubt that Saddam and Gaddafi and, you know, these guys are, you know, they're the bad guys.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Our guys are no better.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting if you look historically, prior to World War One, the general population did not want to get involved in a European war, and they were absolutely right. They said, it's not our conflict; it's their conflict. We want no part of it. We came here to escape exactly what was going on in Europe, and we don't want to go now. Send ourselves go there, but as well as our sons go over there to fight a war, to die there, when we came here because we wanted to get away from it altogether. But of course, then we have all the false flags that say, oh, we have to go to war now. We had the Lusitania, and then we had, and World War II was the same way. The American people did not want to go to war in Europe again. But then, of course, there's Pearl Harbor, which is, I read The Day of Deceit, it's a documentary an actual documentary of everything that went on, and it's clear that we had a lot at stake in that ourselves. But we didn't want to go to war, so we have to manufacture something, an event that forces us to justify to the people to go to war. But my point being here is that today it's like we're expected to go to war. If we're not at war, we're not doing our job. We've changed 100. We've done a 180. If we're not at war at some obscure place in 8,000 miles away, we have a weak government, and we are not doing our job as a world's policeman, which is the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard in my life.
I had a political science class when I was in college, and the professor, I don't know if he's still alive or not. He probably is. He wasn't that old at the time. He was an admitted Marxist, and he didn't hide it. I mean, he came right out and said, "I'm a Marxist. I believe in the teachings of Karl Marx and so forth and so on." And I was like, okay, all right, you're being honest.
Yeah, that's okay.
We know where you're coming from. I don't agree with you, but I know we know where you're coming from. And he talked about, this was in 1990, and he talked about a new world order, go figure. And I don't know if it was before or after GW the First had made the comment about the new world order. It might have been afterwards. But regardless, he talked about how this was going to play out, and America's role was going to be as the global police. And we were going to go around and basically intervene, stick our noses where they don't belong, and that was going to be our role in this whole new paradigm that the world was moving to. And this was pre-globalization. That kick didn't really start until the mid-90s, where you started to hear globalization all the time. This predated that even. And so, this is something that obviously people were looking at doing quite some time ago. I mean, we had this Cold War with Russia, and this was one of the things I made, a comment about it in the latest piece that Graham and I put together. It hasn't gone out yet. The Cold War never really ended. A lot of people thought that because Reagan said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall," and East Germany and West Germany were reunited as a country, that somehow that meant the Cold War ended. And that's nowhere near the truth. The communism died, that day. And, you and I both know communism is alive and well.
Yeah, we bought it, and we have it here now.
Yeah, we imported it like we do everything else. That was the thing. And again, it comes back. I know we've talked about this before, but there might be new people watching. You have to watch what these words mean. People think communism is like little spies, sneaking into a country with, a tin of beef jerky and wire cutters, to knock out communications or, that kind of stuff. That's not communism. Communism is when the government or the state controls the factors of production: land, labor, capital, technology, so forth and so on. That's all communism is. It's from each according to his means, to each according to his needs, was another way that communism was explained. Through the state, the state is the conduit, between the haves and the have-nots. Isn't that what we're doing in America now? We take from producers and we pay people to loaf, like Europe. And Europe's had, some serious consequences for this. But of course, we're immune. I get emails all the time, and people say, you're one of these fear mongers and blah blah blah, because none of that bad stuff that happened to Europe is ever going to happen here. So I ask why, and they say, well, this is America. Huh? What are people, stupid? This is America. Yeah, okay, it's America. So what? You walk in and all of a sudden all the rules of economics and laws don't apply anymore? It's such baloney, and it's propagated by this media, that justifies these wars, justifies deficit spending, justifies inflation from a monetary perspective, which then results in price inflation. And it's like the Wizard of Oz. You got this big show, you got this big song and dance, big show that's going on. And it makes you kind of crazy. See, I'm going dizzy. Look at that. And that's what it does. I mean, it makes your eyes bleed when you start thinking of this stuff. And what's more important even than that, because like I said, I know we've talked about this before, is getting people unplugged from that whole thing. And getting people to look at a news program and understand there's a reason it's called a program. And there's a reason that television is called programming.
That's right. That's a good point. I never thought of it that way. You're right.
It's called programming for a reason, because it's designed for a purpose. Some of it's designed to entertain. Some of it's designed for propaganda. Some of it's designed to misinform. And what I've come to understand and come to the conclusion of is that the ones who claim to be the ones who are doing the informing are the biggest disinformers out there. Yeah. You have to be very careful, and you have to use your common sense litmus test when somebody tells you something anymore.
Yeah. Do you think when they talk about that 0.1%, the 62 people in the world that have more wealth than half the world's population, I wonder how many of those, that 0.5% are involved in government programs and war. That would be an interesting statistic, because that's where really the big money is made. And of course, the average Joe Blow's not involved in that. We're just paying for it. And I often wonder where this wealth came from. Now, I have no problem with someone inventing something, building a big business, making billions. Sort of like the guys on Shark Tank, they're billionaires. God bless them. That's wonderful. That's great. What bothers me is when you have most of the people in the Beltway in the same economic position, and none of them have any jobs.
Yeah. I mean, that's where, the whole thing, became unraveled. You start talking about, just the economics of government, really, and the whole idea that the way it used to be is, if you look at the people that attended the first and second Continental Congresses, they were farmers, doctors, lawyers, what have you. They all had a job, and it was a hardship for them, to leave, because they had to leave their job for a period of time.
They just wanted to go back home and do what they had to do. Get things.
Yeah, they had to endure hardship to go and participate in the Congress. It was never a career. You did your 2 years, your year, whatever it was, and you went home and you worked and continued to work. And then all of a sudden now it's, well, you get into Congress and now you get fat cat health care benefits, big time pensions, protection. I understand some of these people probably need protection. With some of the things they've done, it's no wonder they need protection.
For people like me, probably, from the populace, that's what.
Yeah. Some of the things that have gone on. But, all these emoluments that these folks get, they're not servants anymore. This is basically, all right, you go there, you serve for a period of time, and now you're on the gravy train. And when you're done, when you get voted out because your constituents realize that you're a useless whatever, now you get the big pension. You can go be a lobbyist.
Right.
The government is big money.
That's right. I mean, the money spigot is never turned off. Let me backtrack a little bit. Do you think Russia is really a threat to Europe and the United States, as we paint it to be?
I'm going to answer this two ways. If we left them alone, probably not. If we're going to provoke them, yeah, I think they are a threat.
No, let's assume let's assume we remain neutral.
And don't do anything to them?
Yeah, and we just free traded with them, and whatever. I mean, what I don't see is what's in it for Russia to start a war in Europe. I mean, there's nothing in it for them at all. In fact, they want to see people do well. They can sell their gas, build their own industry. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
No,
but maybe I'm altruistic or something.
No, I mean they've got a good thing there with their monopoly with natural gas to Europe, and that's part of what's in the article. Also, why we're poking our nose into Syria has everything to do with Russia's natural gas monopoly in Europe. So there's no reason for them to go to war with Europe. I mean, wars start because of money, power, control, things like that. You look at World War II. Why did we get involved? Well, because Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. They didn't just wake up one morning and decide, well, let's attack Pearl Harbor. No, they did it because they were provoked. How?
That's right.
We cut off their petroleum supply,
right.
among other things.
Yeah.
So that's why I said, you leave them alone, they're probably going to leave us alone.
Yeah.
You start parking missiles off of their borders. What would we do? Let's flip it around. What would the United States do? What did the United States do when Russia decided to park missiles 90 miles off the coast of Florida? There was immediate, that escalated very quickly. We became very concerned, deservedly. People were building, underground shelters and so forth in case, the whole thing went haywire, and that kind of stuff. So if somebody did that to us, we'd react in exactly the same way that they're reacting right now.
But we have missiles in most of the former countries of the of the Warsaw Pact. Now we have U.S. bases there. I think Kazakhstan we recently got thrown out of. They probably said pack up and leave. But we have missiles right on the border of Russia now. When we promised that we would not expand NATO into the Warsaw Pact, the prior Warsaw Pact nations, we not only expanded it, but we kept NATO. We should not have kept NATO at all. We should have just disbanded NATO, had everyone go home, and just let everything be. It would have been fine. But we keep on provoking. We keep on putting, we can put arms. Well, putting arms in Syria. I mean, that's really close to Russia, a lot closer than Cuba was. And yet, what's ever good for the goose is not good for the gander, or vice versa. And it just doesn't seem to me that the people of the United States have any thought process. All we do is take a sound bite from TV and repeat it, and that becomes gospel and true.
Yeah. Well, and it's like a football game. They've made this whole thing out to be a football game. We're the good team, they're the bad team. And it's almost, you turn on the news, and it's almost like these idiotic political conventions. It's like a ball game. And I'm going to tell you something to go down a rabbit trail here. I analyze policy, as an economist. That's what I prefer to do. I don't like to talk about politics so much because it's a useless debate. People, everybody's got their what they believe, and that's fine. I mean, everybody has the right to believe what they believe. You very seldom do you change somebody's mind when you're talking about politics. So I'll talk about it with people who share the same position I do. Otherwise, it just turns into an argument and it's not productive.
Right, yeah.
But I like analyzing policy, and I'm going to tell you, this election cycle has been the absolute worst that I can remember in terms of getting specifics out of anybody about anything. Well, we're going to do this, and then there's clapping. And we're going to do that, and we'll wave the signs. And it's probably like a game show.
Yeah.
You know, where there's that big applause thing that flashes. So they know to sit there and do the little seal clap. But I haven't heard any specifics. Well, we have to cut the national debt. No kidding. How are we going to do it? What is going to be done? You can either make more or spend less. So what are we going to do? How are we going to do? Yeah, we do need to cut the national debt. Yes, we do need to stop the flow of illegal immigrants. Well, we're going to build a wall. We have Border Patrol. They go around it. They'll tunnel under a wall. Here's the thing, and this is what people don't understand. You look at Europe. You look at Britain. The main reason, the main trigger, and I've talked to now probably 50 or 60, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a fair amount of people in England about the whole Brexit referendum and what triggered that. There was discontent before that, but you want to know what triggered it? The immigration. Mm-hmm. These people come into the country, the government sets them up on the dole. Now there, they have to work to get the government money. They have to do some sort of job, menial or otherwise. So I mean, they're kind of a step ahead of us. We just hand them a freebie. But there's these people are coming in. They're not British citizens, obviously. They're taking jobs that British citizens would actually like to work at and do, and they're getting free handouts from the government. And the people said, you know what, we're tired of this. We don't this borderless society, the European Union, we don't want it. Well, that's the establishment's agenda globally. That's the globalist agenda, is for a borderless world. The sovereignty. There is not going to be sovereignty for nations or for states or for anything. You're going to be part of this, open society, whatever you want to call it. And that means free flow of people from Mexico. It means free flow of people from Canada. It means free flow of people from, the people have been leaving Turkey by the droves. And, that situation's getting out of hand here real quick. And, so we're taking these people in. And they talk about, well, that these people might be terrorists. Nobody's checking them out. We've been flying planes over these countries and bombing the daylights out of these people for how many decades now? And now their countries are bad. They want to leave. They come here. Maybe they're mad.
Oh yeah.
Maybe they say, well, I'll go over to America. I'll get some free food, get a free apartment, and free health care, and then I'm going to do something bad.
But we wouldn't have this problem, Andy. Would we not have this problem if we had, two countries, let's say they had a common border, and both countries were totally free market economies where the government was there, similar to our Constitution, to protect the equal rights of others. In other words, do whatever you want, provided you not infringe upon the equal rights of others. And if a person from country A went to country B, right, and then there's a border, but there's no border patrol, and a person comes in and there are no jobs at all for this person, what is the person going to do? Go back to country A, right? They're going to go back to their own country. I mean, they're not going to stay there and starve. They're going to go back to where their family is. At least they have a chance. They have a support system. But the problem is they leave a country. If country B is bombing country A, for example, and make situations untenable there, people from that country go to country B to get away from the bombing. But then country B also has a welfare system like we have, and they get on the dole or they get special treatment, then the people in that country say, we need to close the borders. Well, the borders are not the problem. It's the government intervention. It's the government policies that's the problem. Or am I just making this too simple?
No, I mean, it's a good point. I mean, the free flow of people isn't the problem. Like you said, it's the magnet that brings them to a place. Britain had the problem because it became well known that, hey, if you go there, they're going to make you work, but they're going to give you all this stuff. You're going to get a better life.
Right.
But here's the problem. You get to the point, especially here in this country, as well. You bring in too many of these people. You give them a free ride. It's not working because they're here they're not even required to produce anything.
Yeah, but I wish we would take the issue and away from open versus closed borders to government
Policy.
Intervention. Yeah, to government intervention versus a free market economy. We never talk about a free market economy. We talk about closing open borders, closed borders, and that's the wrong conversation to have. Will never get resolved because you're not changing the manner in which people are treated once they get in that country, whether or not they get on the welfare state, Social Security, whatever the case may be. So it's going to be better here than it is in Mexico, where we're financing the drug lords in Mexico, and that's the only people making money.
Don't do that.
Oh, I know. I'm exaggerating now, but many of them are leaving their towns because they no longer have a mayor of that town, because the only people with high-powered rifles, guns, and money are the drug lords, and that's basically being financed by the United States because of our war on drugs. So it seems to always go back to a government policy that creates the problem, and it's not the specific, the border, the drug itself, etc. It's not always the subject. It's not always the subject, but the topic should be: is this a free country? Is this not a free country?
Yeah, if these people came over and they knew that, well, all right, you're going to go to America and we don't care. We're going to just open the whole thing wide open. Come into the country, now the whole security thing and all that aside. Let's look at it just economically. You come in here, all right, what's the first thing you got to do? Well, all right, there's no policy to give you the handout.
Right.
So you're going to try and find a job. All right, well, here's a job, okay. Is it worth it for me to stay here? Now you're starting to make economic decisions. Does it make sense to stay here? Does it make sense to bring the family over here? Well, maybe there's no job at all. So I'm not going to stay, like you said. I'm going to go back home. So yeah, I mean, it's about policy. So it's ironic because you have one policy that causes a problem, then you need 10 more policies to fix the problem.
Right, and then
now you have 11 policies and you still have the problem.
Yeah, but it gets worse. Well, people argue, for example, that, well, if you allow all these people in, these people are willing to work for less than, our minimum wage, etc. I said, well, therein lies a problem. Minimum wage is a government program. Get rid of that. If we never had the minimum wage, then that same situation would exist between two people born in America. For example, if a person has a job, a company has a job opening, and there was no government intervention at all, you can pay them whatever you want, or pay them nothing if they want to work for nothing. It's up to them, all right? And a person comes in and says, fine, I'll do that job for $5 an hour. And somebody else comes by and says, hey, I'm even more qualified. I'll do it for $4.50. The situation's still the same. It makes no difference if they come from Mexico or they come from across the street or another town or another city or another state. The free market is the free market, and everyone's wages would be lower. But however, we would be more productive. The dollar would be, of course, worth more, but probably still be backed by gold and silver. So we would have tremendous purchasing power, and the economy would grow, meaning more jobs for everyone. And if someone from Mexico comes in, which I think is kind of ludicrous, because if a person comes in from Mexico, most likely they don't speak English very well. Most likely they're not going to be as schooled, but provided we didn't have government schools, we had real schools, but they're not well schooled. So you're saying to me, people who argue this point are saying to me, someone who does not speak English, right, who has no education, doesn't know how to live in America, is more competitive on a job than I am. If that was the case, then it's not that person's problem. It's not the company's problem. It's my problem. How did I put myself in a position where someone who doesn't even speak the language is more qualified than I am to take the job? So it doesn't make any economic sense when you get the government out. When you put the government in, then it makes all the sense in the world, because then you're playing with government numbers and government welfare programs.
Yeah, and anyway, that's exactly why they have to have all these these made up statistics about unemployment and jobs and all that kind of stuff. Here's the thing, the minimum wage, and this is going to come up again because they're going to want to make that, what was it, $15?
That's right.
An hour.
Yeah.
They're going to want to make that national.
There's something like
policy.
11 states that are going to that. I think
Yeah.
it is something like that.
The feds are going to get involved, and the ones that don't want to go along with it, they're going to force them to. Here's the problem: if you didn't have a fiat money system, in other words, if you had a strictly gold-backed or silver-backed or cow chip-backed currency that was backed by something tangible, particularly a metal or even oil, that was backed by something tangible, where the only way you could get more of it is if you actually created jobs and had people go and look for it, or you were able to produce enough other stuff that you could trade, in surplus with other nations and get it that way. If you had, that old system back, you wouldn't need a minimum wage.
That's right. Absolutely.
And you certainly wouldn't need to increase it every so often, because the only reason they increase the minimum wage is because the dollar is losing its purchasing power.
Yeah.
That's why it has to be increased all the time. And people don't think that. Well, this isn't a living wage. Forget about that. It's not a living wage because the dollar doesn't buy anything.
That's right. It's well. Tell me if I'm wrong. They always talk about deflation is bad, but if you have a productive, competitive, free market society, isn't deflation good because your dollar buys more? That means you're being more productive. What you are producing actually costs less to make. You actually have more. The government is not taking anything from you, all right? So you're looking for deflation. Now, in an environment that we have today, you're looking for inflation because you're always trying to beat the guy the next price increase by making more money and then spending it as fast as you can.
Back in 2006, they stopped calculating the M3 monetary aggregate, which is the broadest measure that we used to use in this country, because they wanted to save the taxpayers money. That was the reason that was given at the time. So they stopped computing it, but there's a way to back into the number anyway, and there's a number of folks that do a reasonably good job of recreating M3 from M2 and some of the other factors, euro dollars and things like that were added in to make M3. Well, anyway. So they've done this recreation. Well, if you look at like from the end of 2009 to the beginning of 2011, we had that big shock in 08, and then from the end of 09 to the beginning of 2011, people actually paid down their debts. The money supply, the M3 money supply, actually contracted for, it was like 13 months. Contracted, so it got, the money supply shrank. So obviously when you make more of something, each unit that's made subsequently becomes worth less. However, when you shrink that monetary aggregate, each unit becomes worth more, because there's less of them. The less you have of something, the more it's worth. Well, the bankers absolutely freaked out because of that, because they want inflation. Their whole paradigm is you need inflation to have an economy. If you want to have economic growth, you have to have inflation. And that is the biggest lie that's ever been told, from an economic perspective. You do not need inflation to grow an economy. You can grow one just fine by producing. See, here's the thing, and this is where you get into the but part. We don't like to produce. We want to consume and borrow.
That's
so if you want to grow, a consumption-driven, 70% of GDP is consumer spending, still is pretty close to that same number that's been that way for a decade. If you want to grow that type of an economy in a fiat system, you need inflation. And you get and they're doing all this stuff, right? All these shenanigans, this monkeying around with the GDP deflator and personal consumption expenditures and this, that, every other three-letter acronym for, some sort of economic metric that exists, all this monkey business that's going on. And what's our growth rate? 1.5% a year? Some ridiculously pitiful.
Oh yeah, it's lower than the rate of inflation, the real rate of inflation.
Yeah, it's absolutely pathetic, and that's with all the monkeying around that they do. So what's the real growth rate? It's negative.
Right.
It's been negative. We entered a recession at the end of 2006. I use an alternative way of deriving growth. It's not perfect. It's better than what they do. I think it's more accurate. Actually, I know it's more accurate, but it's not perfect. But according to that, we entered the recession at the end of 2006, and we've never left it. All the money printing, when the government borrows money and spends it on whatever, that doesn't count as growth.
Right.
All these clowns out there on these different news networks and whatever different people, blogsters, whatever you want to call them, they sit there and they say, well, when the government borrows money, that makes Americans rich by accounting definition. They use that term a lot, by accounting definition, because the government borrows, so it gets money, which it spends into the economy, which gives us jobs. And as they're saying, the government gives us. So by the government borrowing, they're making us rich. They're borrowing us to prosperity. And these idiots, and I'm not calling them idiots because they're idiots, and or they're the ultimate deceivers.
That's right. Yeah, I mean they know what they're doing. They know. Yeah.
They know it's reversible.
Right.
They know that when you borrow, you have to repay. They think you can just take the good part of the borrowing, which is somebody giving you money, and then you never have to worry about.
Right. Well, they don't have to worry because we're going to wind up paying it for them. They're going to benefit. We're going to lose. Andy, excuse me, I want to cut you off just if you don't mind because I'm getting waved on station identification. Could you hold on just for about 60 seconds and we'll be right back?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. Folks, don't go away. We'll be back in 60 seconds. Stay with us, please.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com.
Ranch Acres Audiology is about caring, about getting the most out of life, about personal attention.
Sometimes helping someone with their hearing is really helping them with more than just hearing. That's the goal of my practice. That's what my goal has been for 20 years.
You're invited to attend our next free Lunch and Learn seminar. Call us today, 918-749-7711.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty. Liberty Talk Radio.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Joe Cristiano. You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. With us, we have Andy Sutton. He's formerly with the financial community, I guess, and now he's involved the sole purpose of blowing the whistle on corruption and helping people around the globe become their own advocates. Andy, this election cycle is, I think, a very strange one in that no one is being specific as to how they're going to make things better. And what I have not heard at all from any of the candidates is hey, how about we get government out of all this stuff? How about we get out of these wars and these interventions overseas? How about we return to the free market and just have free market medicine, free market everything, and reduce the size of government by billions of dollars every month, and just see what happens. It's worked before, it'll work again, and everything that we are doing, we know has never worked, but we'll continue doing it anyway. I don't understand, but they haven't even given us a clue as to what they would do, other than you hear these platitudes like, we have to work together. We have to learn to work together, and then we can solve this problem. Whatever they mean by work together is beyond me. I never know what I said, because if I called Hitlery or the Donald and say, I want to work together with you, I'd get arrested for bothering them. We lost your sound, Andy. Your sound is off. Some sound. Is his sound? Hold on. Get Andy. Let's try that again.
When they say work together, that's code speak for hold on to your wallet, because when they start talking about, and I watched a little bit the other night when Paul Ryan was up there doing his thing, and it was like it was like cheerleading.
Yeah.
Right. It's like break out the pom-poms and go team. I mean, there's no specifics, so everything is just like you said. It's very generic platitudes about, well, we're going to work together and we're going to win this thing. And I'm trying to think of some of the other stuff, but it was all along those lines. Nobody is giving any specifics, about that. And I'll give credit where credit is due. I don't agree with the guy, but at least when Obama was running back in 2008, at least he gave some specifics on what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
I don't agree with any of it, but at least it was out there. At least you had an idea what you were getting into. With what's going on now, you have one that should be arrested. I mean, let's be honest. At the very least, under indictment. So she really hasn't had a whole lot of time to consider what her strategy would be. As far as what getting things done. I mean, we know what she did when she was in the White House the first time as the first lady. She was a big advocate for socialized medicine. So you kind of get an idea of, where she's going to head there. It's going to be more government, and the other guy he's a clown. He makes a good TV show, but there's no substance. There's no policy. Nobody has said, all right, the American people want to know how the heck we're going to do all this. We're $19.4 trillion in debt, and that's just what we owe right now. Professor Kolikoff, calculates the present value of the unfunded stuff, and it's 12, 15 times higher than that.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've got a serious problem. This is what we're going to do: A, B, C, and D, to help alleviate that problem. It's going to take a long time, obviously, but these are the specific things that we're going to do. We're going to shrink this type of spending. We're going to shrink that type of spending. What are they going to do? There was just a study that was released not too long ago that is saying that within 7 years, 100% of government revenue, and this is all current policies intact, nothing without changes, 100% of government revenue is going to go towards Social Security, Medicare, and interest on the national debt.
Yeah, that's right.
What are they going to do? That's 7 years is not a long time.
Then that begs the question, those people in government that know this, I mean, they know this better than you and I. I mean, they have it all planned out. They own most of the assets in the United States or in the world because they're part of that, 1/10 of 1%. What are they doing with their money, and how are they going to? I'm sure they just don't have it in cash or in bonds or high yield bonds or anything like that. They're doing something with their money because they know it cannot exist. Michael Tanner's been on this program. I've read his book, the Debt Crisis, and he also shows that what's going to happen is in the next seven years, the debt starts getting so large. When it accumulates exponentially, and the debt burden goes straight up, not on an angle, but actually goes straight up in a few years. It's exactly what you're saying. Well, what are these people who are in the know? What are they doing with their money? Obviously, they're not putting in paper dollars and hiding it in a safe deposit box.
No, the elite, that 0.5%, the establishment, the elite, whatever you want to call them, they conduct most of their major business in gold. It's been that way for a long time.
Okay.
They use silver also.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do business in land.
Yeah.
Tangible type assets.
Yeah. Things that the average American has nothing of. Oh, by the way, Andy, we had someone. Excuse me for cutting you off like that. We have a caller on the line. I'm afraid they'll hang up if they hang on any longer. Could you hold on to your thought, and can we take our caller now?
Sure.
Okay,
Right,
caller, you're on the air. Your first name, please.
Joe, this is Lloyd.
Yes, Lloyd. Thank you for calling Liberty Talk Radio. Your question or comment, please.
Well, you guys were just commenting on the fact that you don't hear any specifics about what you would do. Well, that's kind of like the making sausage. What really needs to be done is so unpalatable to anybody that's actually thinking that you really don't want to mention it. And most of the time when you start talking economic theory or you start talking about the actual monetary system, which is the real problem, it's not spending, it's not saving so much as the fact that the spending and the saving, the situation that we have, is the result of our stupid monetary system that's based on the debt note. So when you start talking those things, people's eyes glaze over. Most people just go to sleep. And then the ones that are actually going to listen, it's going to be again like saying, well, here's how we make sausage. We take the eyeballs and the ears and the nose and sweep them off of the floor and grind them up. And then we're going to stuff them into a little sausage link here, and you're going to eat it. Well, nobody wants to hear that, and you're not going to gain any votes by that. So you're never going to hear any real specifics.
Right.
And then the other part of it is, probably 90% of the people there at the Republican convention don't even have an actual conception of how the monetary system functions. And so it would take probably 30 or 45 minutes just to get a base perception over to their brain to be able to comprehend what you're talking about.
That's too much work.
Lloyd, unfortunately, you're absolutely right. I don't like that. Well, you must not like sausage, Lloyd, I guess.
Oh, I love sausage. I've got 2 links of summer sausage over here. I love this stuff.
Well, Andy, what are your comments on that?
I mean, he's absolutely right, and I think that it's probably one of the reasons why we continue to hear less and less and less of this. I mean, I will say, when Bernie Sanders was still, in this thing, and putting his stuff forward, he, as far as specifics, he probably gave more specifics than anybody. We're going to make college free, but he never said how.
Right.
So I mean, he even, here's the magic. Here's the answer. They want to do all this stuff. It costs money. They have to get the money from somewhere. So there's a couple of ways they can get that money, that currency, to do that. They can steal it from somebody else. They can tax us, or they can have it printed by the Federal Reserve at interest, which we pay. So those are basically the 3 ways that they can do it. They can steal it from another nation. And we've done that. What did we do when we went into Baghdad? We took the gold. We took the money. We took the oil. So I mean that's a money also. So those are basically the 3 simple ways that the government can do this. People don't seem to mind the printing aspect. They don't seem to mind if we go into some foreign land and steal it from somebody else. They do mind the taxation, but they don't mind it if it's not them. If they say, well, there's a bozo that has a radio show that he calls it Tax Wall Street or something like that, where they want to tax the banks. And it's like, that's about the dumbest thing I ever heard. I mean, I don't like the banks, But if you tax them, all they're going to do is jack up the interest rates and their fees and all that kind of stuff. They're not going to pay. You know what I mean? Companies don't pay taxes. If you raise the tax on the company, they're just going to raise their prices. You know, and for somebody with a PhD, as this individual has, I mean, it's a pretty elementary and fundamental error in thinking, especially with the banking bunch of all people. You know, they're screwing us as it is. You know, you start taking their money, you know, to pay for social programs or whatever, and they're just going to find a way to get it from, you know, from depositors or whatever. You know, they'll get it. They'll get it. Don't worry. But you know, I think that's part of the reason. You know, the whole sausage analogy is very good. It is unpalatable. What's going to have to be done? And here's the problem: there is no will to reform in this country by the people. You're not going to reform anything from the top down. The way you reform is from the bottom up. So the American people, at some level, at some point, have to decide, we've had enough of this. We're not going to do this anymore. We're going to change the system from the bottom up.
But if we did that, Andy, and Lloyd, I'd like you to comment on this as well. But if we did that, there'd be a groundswell of people who insist on changing the way things are being done. Those people who are the recipients of current government programs that are deleterious to the economic situation that we have at hand now are going to rebel. So don't you have race wars and all sorts of economic wars literally on the street that the government that tries to avoid by placating everyone, the Black Lives Matter movement and giving them all the credit in the world and all this other stuff, when everyone's looking outside of their community when they should be looking inside the community to say, why the hell are we so poor? It's not people outside that's making us poor. It's us making ourselves poor. People don't want to look introspectively at what they are doing to determine whether or not what they are doing is not accomplishing anything and making them poorer. They just want to take from you so that they have more, and that doesn't gel well. And I think that's the reason why you have no specifics coming from these clowns running for office.
Yeah, and that's what you just said is that's exactly what would need to change. Is the people that are receiving those benefits, they would have to decide, what, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to rely on somebody else. I want to be independent. I'm going to get a job. I'm going to pay my own way instead of having somebody else do it for me. You're not going to have some politician or some bozo in the White House or in Congress, pass a law or some dumb policy that's going to change this.
But no one's going to give him a job, Andy, for some kid in a ghetto neighborhood. And I come from a ghetto neighborhood, so I'm not looking down at anybody. I come from Harlem. No one's going to take some kid who dropped out of high school and start him at a menial job and pay him $15 an hour plus benefits, plus uninsurance benefits, plus health care, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No one's going to, because it costs the employer well over $20 to hire a kid who can hardly speak English, can hardly read, has no education, no skills, and they're going to pay him over $20 an hour to do a menial job. That's insanity.
Well, see, here's the thing. They're not going to pay anybody to do that menial job.
That's right.
They're just not going to fill the job.
Yeah.
That's why the minimum wage creates unemployment.
Yeah.
When they raise it, because if you can't bring $20 worth of value per hour to that firm, there's no point in them hiring you.
Yeah. Like Peter Schiff says, he loves automation because machines don't sue you. And I have a business. I've had people come back to me, and I knew there were bad apples after a while, and said, this person is dangerous, and I allow them, although they weren't worth a damn, I allow them to collect unemployment. And the reason for that, I didn't contest it, is because I knew they would come back and have some, this person did all these bad and I'd wind up in court trying to defend myself from a maniac, although those things never, but because you are always wrong until proven innocent. That's unfortunate in those cases.
Oh, absolutely.
So
Here's the problem in a nutshell. You're going to have to, for this to get fixed, this is what, peacefully and quietly, is you're going to have one group of people that currently exercises control and is deleterious to the system by their own existence because they get the big pensions and what we talked about earlier. They're going to have to voluntarily say, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to become statesmen again instead of, basically political hookers, for lack of a better descriptor. They're going to have to do this voluntarily. The government itself is going to have to say, we are too big, there's too many of us, we need to be streamlined. So instead of having all these programs for ourselves, we're actually going to attain gainful employment back in our districts.
Right. That'd be a step in the right direction. It'd be a good example. Yeah. Lloyd, you have any comments on that?
Oh, yeah. Well, Andy said earlier the fact that it's going to have to come from the bottom up, and that's exactly correct. If you try to put in policies like I was saying earlier, you're not going to get anyone to vote for you. You're not going to get anyone to support you in any way. The only real solution, and again, this sounds horrible, but you could try it from the top by saying we're going to crash the entire economy and nobody's going to get anything and we're going to start from scratch. Now, of course, I mean, that would never happen. Or you could do it kind of subtly, allow the system to crash, go into zombie apocalypse to where the whole society crashes down to nothing, and then all of the survivors are forced now to be self-sufficient, self-reliant, independent, and provide for themselves. That's the only real solution to it, and nobody wants to hear that. But until people change their moral perspective on the inside, have a conversion of heart, this system is destined to just go into oblivion. It's going to go through a collapse eventually, and that's going to be forced on a lot of people.
But Andy, wouldn't that happen?
I believe you can do it from the top down.
Andy, wouldn't that happen if we had a currency crisis where all of a sudden we had a devaluation of the currency or we couldn't pay our debts? Wouldn't we have this zombie apocalypse? I mean, wouldn't that happen automatically?
Well, you have to keep in mind that the system is in the middle of it's collapsing right now. All this stuff that is going on to prevent it from collapsing even faster.
Right.
That's why all the intervention,
the negative interest rates, the printing of money.
Exactly. That's why all this stuff is going on, because the system can't stand on its own, because it's broken and it's irretrievably broken.
Yeah.
And the policy makers, they know this.
Yeah.
The guys at the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, Bank of England, all these guys, they know this. It's broken. Now, it's in their best interest to keep it going as long as possible because, if there's a big currency crisis and say the dollar goes away, you have 95% of people in America thinking that means that they're not going to have to pay their bills anymore.
Yeah.
That's not going to be the way this works.
Well, I'm sure, Lloyd, you're a multi-millionaire or billionaire? Are you in the billionaire category?
Neither one. I'm just barely a multi-thousandaire.
Okay, join the club. All right, I know someone who has $100,000 in a cash book in a savings account in a bank, and this person thinks that they have $100,000 worth of wealth. What would you tell that person, Andy?
I would tell them you've got $100,000 that aren't dollars. First of all, you've got 100,000 Federal Reserve notes, which are debt instruments that are sitting in a bank. And if you tried to get them at one time, you'd have the police show up and probably escort you to jail. The bank is, first of all, they don't pay you any interest at all, period. If you want any kind of interest, you need to tie your money, your currency, up for 2, 3, 5, even 10 years. They have 10-year CDs now, and that'll get you like 2.5%. Why you would do that is beyond me, that's almost as insane as somebody saying to the U.S. government, yeah, I'll give you my money for the next 30 years and you can pay me negative interest. In fact, what that means is I'll pay you. I'll pay the U.S. government to own one of its precious bonds. Oh, wait, they're not so precious because there's so many of them.
Right.
You know, it's absolutely ridiculous that people pile. They call them safe havens. What's safe about that?
There's nothing safe about them, right? Do you agree with that, Lloyd?
Well, here we're not in negative yet. You can get 1.58% on a 10-year bond right now. I don't know why you're not flocking to that.
Yeah, with real inflation running at 4 or 5%. So we okay. All right, folks. Hey, guys. I hate to say this, but our witching hour is up. And we're going to be shut off soon if we don't conclude this broadcast. Lloyd, I want to thank you very much for calling Liberty Talk Radio. Please feel free to call in at any time. Again, we always enjoyed to hear from you. Andy, I'd like to give you the last 60 seconds of the program to sum things up, please.
Well, that's a good point Lloyd just made about interest rates. In the next day or so, there's going to be a piece coming out. It's the first of a three-part series on the three biggest burning issues of the day that nobody's talking about. The first was Russia. That's going to come out in the next day or so. The second one's going to be the negative U.S. yield curve. When you look at the yields on U.S. government bonds and then subtract even the government's measurements of inflation, which are understated, you're looking at negative interest rates pretty much across the board. The 30-year, it kind of hovers one side or the other. You start talking about what people are really experiencing, we're negative across the board. Right. We're going to talk about that and what that means, you know, what that actually translates into for the average person. And then the third part of that, we're going to leave a secret for right now. But it was talked about in the last hour, but we're gonna let that kind of develop a little bit and let people think about what that might be and add some suspense to it. I can be reached at www.andysutton.com. There's a contact form there if you want to email me and ask a question. We have been having, and I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to talk about it, I have been having some absolutely amazing exchanges with some of your listeners and some of my own readers. And the stuff that's going back and forth is just really, it's really good. It keeps the blood pumping here and keeps me motivated to keep doing this because there's not a lot of us, but there are some folks that are paying attention and they're good folks. And you know, I truly value that and treasure that, and I feel blessed because of it. So,
thank you so much. I feel the same way. Andy, we've been having you on about once a month. You think in the next, in the near future, we can up that up to maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks because there's so much going on and we never seem to hit on all the subjects that we want to talk about. Would you be available more often than once a month?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Let's see. We'll be in contact with you because there's so much going on right now. That 1 month seems to be like waiting an entire year, you know. So we certainly enjoy having you on the program. We look forward to you coming back again, and we'll be in contact with you soon. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Andy. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, folks, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well, stay tuned.